Hello, everyone. GM. Welcome back to another episode of Overpriced JPEGs. Whew! We got a good one for you today. Today's guest is Luca Netz, the CEO of Pudgy Penguins. I was going to say founder, but he is not the founder. He, in fact, purchased Pudgy Penguins for about $2.5 million and has been on this warpath of a turnaround, I guess you could call it. And I'm really excited for you guys to hear this episode. I think Luca is amazing. I have a long intro to give here. One, because I really want to tee up this episode properly. And two, because I have some administrative notes that we have to talk about, especially for folks who are OPJ NFT holders. So please bear with me as this intro is a little bit longer, but I promise this episode is worth every moment of wait, or you may end up skipping it, whatever you end up doing. Okay, so to give a little background here, Luca has an incredible story, and I think it's worth understanding his story a little bit in order to, before you listen to this episode. I don't get into Luca's background in this episode because there was just so much I wanted to talk to him about in terms of the vision for Pudgy Penguins. But I do want to give folks a little bit of a sense of his backstory here in case there's anybody who doesn't know, because I do think it's relevant. So real fast, and I may get some of the specifics a little bit off here, but I mean, Luca's story is crazy. Basically, this kid grows up, and he's talked about this publicly in other podcasts, grew up single mom, very poor. He and his brother and his mom basically living couch to couch, like moving from friend's couch to friend's couch, really all over the world. And so sort of didn't have like a home base in that sense. Finally end up in LA, which is where he spent, I guess, a plurality of his childhood, it sounds like, or starting when he was a little bit older. He drops out of high school at, I think, 16. Again, sorry if I'm getting some of these little details wrong, but directionally this is all correct. Drops out of high school at like 16 and is throwing like warehouse parties in downtown LA, making $1,000, $1,500, like, a pop. And then ends up joining the startup Ring. If folks know, like the doorbell company Ring, saw that have some explosive growth. And then really starts to find his niche when he basically starts selling products through influencers. So he had friends and was connected to some big social media influencers. And he basically starts powering their like e-commerce backend. So the influencer would sell a product and Luca was the one who had created the product, make sure the shipment, fulfillment, all of that is like happening. I don't know, running ads. I don't know if they were running ads at that point, but like makes a lot of money, basically splitting 50-50 profits with these influencers or taking a big cut of profits from these influencers selling products on their social media handles. I know there's probably a couple other things, but at one point he then also, his like most recent thing before Pudgy's, I believe, was he basically got involved with this toy called Gel Blasters, which is now like one of the biggest toys at Walmart. And he really puts them on the map through like social media ads, Instagram ads. The upshot here is Luca is just this incredible hustler with such an instinct for marketing and social media and creating really viral products that way. All of that is important context to understand when we talk about Pudgy's and what his vision and plan is for Pudgy's. So I wanted folks to have that context. I apologize if you already knew it, but I think there's probably folks who don't know it. And it's honestly like, go listen to another podcast. You can find a number of different podcasts with Luca out there where he talks about sort of his backstory, because it is pretty amazing. Okay. In this particular episode, I really just wanted to focus on his vision for Pudgy's and what he's doing. So we talk about their social media strategy, how they're doing what they do. GIPHY in particular, some people know that they have over 1 billion views on GIPHY, which is crazy and interesting, and we get into that. I also really dig deep with him on their strategy around licensing and merchandising. That's been such a huge pillar of what they've done to start, and I really get into why did he decide to go to start there. What is his thinking about it? What are the risks to that? And just getting his insights all around. I think this is just a fantastic episode, so I'm really excited for y'all to hear it. But we still have a couple more things to go through in this intro before we get into the meat, before we get into the episode itself. A couple administrative things on the overpriced JPEGs side. So first, if you are an OPJ NFT holder, we finally have a couple of announcements here. I will post all of these. We'll give you the details below, and so you can also read these, because I'm about to give you a little bit of a whirlwind here. First, and we have largely announced this, but we now can announce it super fully and officially. Our very first Overpriced JPEGs Happy Hour Tour, Overpriced Happy Hour Tour live event is going to be on March 30th at 6 p.m. with Julian Holguin, the Doodles CEO. This is going to be an awesome one. We are going to be at Ampersand Studios, an awesome venue in Wynwood, really close to where NFT Miami is happening. And I mean, I'm looking to go deep with Julian on the Doodles vision, much like what I do in this episode here with Luca. Going to do the same thing with Julian, really talking about what is the strategy, what is the vision, what have they done wrong, what have they done right, what have they learned. So it'll be a great live conversation with Julian. And then, of course, anybody who's at the event will have the opportunity to also pick Julian's brain, and we'll have questions from the audience that we'll get into. And then there'll be cocktails, networking, hanging out, maybe a little dancing. We'll just make it like a super fun event. Let's take pictures. Let's just like have a super fun time. I think there's an after party that's being planned, but I can't confirm for sure. And so that's going to be a blast. Okay. Next Thursday, March 16th, OPJ NFT holders will be able to start reserving their seats for that event with Julian. So that is next Thursday, March 16th. You can start reserving your seats to attend that event with Julian if you are an OPJ NFT holder. There will be a max of 150 seats that can be reserved for that. So we'll have plenty more announcements about that coming out. But just so you know, March 16th, you can start reserving your seat for the March 30th event with Julian Hogwin in Miami. But I have another very important set of announcements that I have to make here. So we need to airdrop y'all, all my OPJ NFT holders, a new NFT. This is embarrassing, but basically the original NFT, the one you guys have now, doesn't give us the ability in the way we need to update the metadata when, for example, you use your NFT to redeem for a bottle of gin. We want that not just to be reflected on the back end, but we want to make sure that's reflected visually somewhere on, for example, OpenSea, so that folks who are maybe buying this NFT on secondary know if the NFT has already redeemed for the bottle of gin and therefore no longer eligible. So anyway, we need to make sure we can do that. And we currently don't have that functionality in exactly the way we need it with the current NFT. So we are airdropping you a new NFT. Here's the bottom line. That new NFT will be identical to the one you have now. And the one you have now, the visuals on that will be totally different. So if you went to sleep for the next 2 weeks and woke up, you would basically not think that anything has changed, because you would still have an NFT that looks like the OPJ NFT that you were used to with the amazing Amber Vittoria art. And the this kind of V1 NFT will look totally different and is basically commemorative of this embarrassing moment in OPJ history, which I think we're going to do something fun there visually to commemorate that embarrassment. In terms of what this all looks like tactically, next Tuesday, March 14th, we are going to be taking a snapshot of all OPJ NFT holders. So we're taking that snapshot next Tuesday, March 14th. Next Wednesday, March 15th, anybody in that snapshot will be airdropped this new NFT. So it'll be a very quick turnaround. We take the snapshot on Tuesday, you get the new NFT airdropped to you on Wednesday. And then on Thursday, you can start using that new NFT to reserve your seat at the OPJ event in Miami on March 30th. This is like critical to understand that this new NFT is where all the utility will live. And the old NFT essentially just becomes, again, commemorative of this embarrassing moment in OPJ history. So the new NFT is what you'll use to redeem for your bottle of gin. It's what you'll use to attend these events. And all of that starts next Tuesday and Wednesday when we take the snapshot and then airdrop the new NFT. Oh my goodness. Thank you guys so much for bearing with that announcement. I apologize. I know it's a longer one than usual, but I really wanted to make sure we got all of that out there. And again, we'll have all of this written out below and linked to any resources you guys need to make sure you are clear on everything. Okay. Last thing, and then we get to the episode, I promise. I've been talking about our newsletter recently. We have the Overpriced JPEGs newsletter on Substack. You can subscribe below. We've had some really awesome pieces coming out lately. We have something that comes out every Monday and every Thursday. And starting next week, we are launching a new very special thing that I am excited about and have been putting a lot of work and attention into, that is launching next week. So if you are not already subscribed to our newsletter, go ahead and subscribe so you can be up to date on everything that we have coming. And also it's a great newsletter. So, subscribe because it's an awesome newsletter. Boy, oh boy. All right. Thank you guys for bearing with us through that. And we need to hear a word from our lovely sponsors. And then we are finally going to get into this amazing conversation with the one and only Luca Netz. I am so excited to announce that this year, Overpriced JPEGs has partnered with OPENSEA, the world's leading NFT marketplace, built for everyone, creators, collectors, noobs, and experts alike. I'm an OPENSEA user because they have the best selection of NFTs and a truly inclusive view of the ecosystem, supporting 8 chains and 8 global languages. I trust the systems they've put in place to keep the space safe, like copyright protection, malicious URL detection and removal, robust verification, and more. It's why they are the place to buy, sell, and create NFTs. That's right. You know OPENSEA, you use OPENSEA, but did you know that OPENSEA now has drops? New exclusive projects launch every week from top projects and creators, and you can check them out now using the link in the show notes. They also recently introduced self-serve drops, which is in beta, and allows creators to launch their projects right on OpenSea. This drops product gives creators access to tools like rich storytelling drop pages, multi-chain support, and drop mechanic customization. The full launch for self-serve drops is coming this spring. So check out the upcoming drops on OpenSea right now using the link in the show notes and own what moves you. You'll also be supporting the show in the process. Let me introduce you to a brand new company that I could not be more excited about, VeeFriends, a Web3 analytics platform that combines on-chain data with social media insights to give you the deepest, most meaningful intelligence into any NFT community. I have tested other analytics platforms out there, but VeeFriends has the most comprehensive capabilities I've seen in the NFT ecosystem. They apply sophisticated data science to wallet histories to determine behavioral patterns and help shape predictive analytics. In other words, they can tell you which Twitter accounts are actually the influencers in your space. And they can tell you what resonates most within a community by looking at what other communities token holders are involved in. The number of use cases here is virtually unlimited. So whether you're a trader, creator, institution, brand, agency, I promise VeeFriends has data that you want to see with the deep and actionable insights that you need to build, analyze, grow, start, whatever you want to do within the NFT space and in terms of building a business and a community. Now, they are still in very early days, so they're eager to connect with the community. So if you're interested in learning more about what VeeFriends can do for you and your business, and you should be, go and fill out the very short form linked to in the show notes, and someone from their team will reach out with more information and an opportunity for a product demo. Trust me, you won't regret it. Luca Netz, I am so excited to finally have you on Overpriced JPEGs.
I'm happy to be here.
I really am excited for this interview. I think anybody who has been paying attention to this space has to be aware at this point that Pudgy's is doing something right and doing something different. I think you as a person also, in past interviews I've listened to with you, like you give off the impression like you have like sort of some secret sauce. So I want to try and get at a bit of that secret sauce today and just lure you into giving up all of your secrets. But let's start with, I want to start with what you guys are doing on the licensing side. Oh, and I probably will have already said this during my intro, but like you have a wild backstory. You've talked about it in a number of different podcasts, so I don't want to start there. And you know, it'll probably come up a little bit through this conversation, but I can link to other interviews Luca has done if you want to hear more about his background, which is crazy. So I think it'll show up a little bit throughout this interview, but I really just want to focus on strategically what y'all are doing with Pudgy's. So I wanted to start with the licensing stuff because I have to say, like, before I really dug into everything you guys were doing, you know, my impression was like, okay, starting with licensing, sort of merchandising. I didn't know how I felt about that as a first move. Can you speak to why that's where you guys have gone first?
Yeah, I love this question. And for us, it was really, since day one, I knew that I couldn't build a business off of royalties. And so strategically speaking, I think there was two things we were trying to accomplish on the physical product side. The first one was, how do you build and grow a sustainable revenue stream that's not dependent on variables you can't control? i.e. Ethereum royalties is a variable I can't control. 1 month, Pudgy Penguins could make $500,000 on royalties, and the next month they'll make $50,000. But it won't be my fault. It'll be because some sort of macro condition like FTX stealing everyone's money, Ethereum taking a 70% haircut. You know, rule number one is I have to be able to control my own destiny. And royalties was not a revenue stream to do that. And keep in mind, we bought this business with no money in the bank. And so though royalties were a huge reason as to why we were able to like stay afloat and hire and scale with basically no products out there in the world, was because of royalties. But I knew that I had to be able to have a sustainable, growable, and forecastable stream of income. And so physical products there, I think, was the reason why we were pressing so hard on it from the beginning, was because I just knew that if we were going to win, we had to create some sort of revenue that was not royalties or mints. The next one is attachment, right? And so right now, I don't believe that digital collectibles are at the place where the everyday person can be a part and be emotionally attached to this digital asset. I think we're not there yet. I think we will be. But marketing and consumer behavior is about touch points. How many times can I touch your mind, right? And really your heart. Like, how frequently can I get you involved and emotionally attached to this brand? And consumer products is a great way to do that. And so on one vertical, you may learn of Pudgy penguins through a headline. And then you might also see it through a GIF. A friend or a family sends you a GIF and you're like, oh, that's a Pudgy penguin. And then maybe you walk into a retail store or you get hit with an advertisement, or a friend or a family, then buys a Pudgy penguin toy. Eventually, you get so many touch points that you come to the conclusion that like, oh, I got to be a part of this because I'm seeing it everywhere. And the physical touch point is one that's not to be underestimated, and one that frankly isn't looked at in the NFT and crypto space. And so those were kind of the 2 points as to why I felt like physical products was such a mandatory move for us from the beginning. And it also, probably the third one, is leaning into my superpower, and our superpower as a team. We make products go viral. We've been a part of probably 2 of the last 5 or 6 brands in the last 5-6 years that have really had a meaningful impact in the world in terms of consumer products. And this is what we know how to do best. We have a playbook and a formula. And so I think kind of taking all 3 variables and 3 pillars into consideration, it seemed like an obvious play for us.
Okay, that makes sense. So you start with just the logical reality of like the bank account. I'm curious, do you know David Horvath? Can't remember if we spoke about him when you and I talked before. Do you know who this is? Okay, David Horvath, founded Ugly Dolls, which was a big consumer product at one point, and then they got a TV show, and now he's another TV show on Nickelodeon. And he writes a lot about building like character brands. He has a really awesome Substack that I love that talks about this. And his focus is like very much on getting your product placed in the right store, not burning out too quickly. Like he has this concept of evergreen ubiquity. He's like, I would start in Asia and you would get in just the right mall in Japan, and then you would expand out from there. And it's a 3-year process. Like, how strategic are you about like, okay, we need to be in Macy's, we don't need to be here, versus like, you know what? Like, none of this stuff matters too much in the beginning. We need to get some revenue in the door. All touch points are good. And let's just like brute force this thing.
Yeah. So the problem, you bring up a really complex question, so I appreciate it. But you can ruin the whole business if you go too big, too fast, and you can take steps backwards. But there's a balance, because there's also the expectation of your holders, like go big or go home, set the bar, lead the charge. And so sometimes you're almost forced to make decisions or your mind tries to force you to make decisions that you think are in the best interest of your holders, but maybe not necessarily your business in its entirety over the long term. And this is something that has been probably the most complex part about balancing this, because on one side, you don't want to get front ran, right? Like you want to be, for Pudgy Penguins, we want to be the brand that is the staple of NFT IP and NFT technology and the biggest retail stores in the world, aligning ourselves with the biggest brands. But there's also tons of stories. I had a call with, somebody who had probably one of the biggest toy brands in the world of the last 10 years. And he said, the worst thing that we did was go to Walmart because we didn't have enough demand, right? I was like, ooh, that's super fascinating, because my experience with Walmart took, Gel Blaster from, a $20 million a year business to $100 million a year business, right? And so there's a really thin line. There's an interesting caveat, and it's one that as time kind of excels, we become even more conscious of. The nature of our deal and our positioning is like, we're here for the next 10 years. We bought this thing for $2.5 million. Like, we didn't do that just to quit 18 months from now or 24 months from now, or have something that was hot for 6 months and then it's dead. Like, that's not our intention. Our goal is, how do we create, Web3's first great IP company, and to be frank, the world's next great IP company, right? And so you touch on a really interesting point, because that is the right way, right? Being really methodical in where you place things and where you go, and not just seeding this everywhere. But there's a balance, because in the same breath, you don't want to be the person who loses the NFT race or the trust or the sentiment from the community, because most people don't really understand that thought process. And then all of a sudden, now our biggest competitors in Walmart, and they're like, why, Luca, why weren't you in Walmart? Right? And so there's a really fascinating balance. And I think this brings up an interesting point to, I think the most complex part about this business is being able to manage expectations through this vehicle that is the NFT, that obviously people care about and appreciating and accruing in value, with this also balance and blend of like, how do you build a brand correctly, which, to be frank, takes a very long time, and like a lot of people won't make it to the finish line to see that brand grow to where it is, just because of the nature of the space and people wanting to go to all the different projects that come out every single day.
I've heard you say that this is the hardest, I won't get this exactly right, but essentially the hardest business space or industry that you've ever operated in. And again, we didn't get into your background at the beginning here, but you've played in a lot of different spaces and succeeded in a lot of different spaces, mostly in the e-commerce world, but sort of, you're a hustler, like you make shit happen. And to hear you say that this was the hardest was really interesting. Is it because of that? Is it because of that dynamic of trying to build in public, which can sometimes lead to things that are directly at odds with what are right for building a like evergreen long-term brand?
Yeah, I mean, it quite literally at its core is a publicly traded startup. I mean, I have all the cons of being publicly traded, and I have all the cons of startup. And this business is not just like, okay, I'm not a publicly traded clothing company where my one job is to make clothes and t-shirts and, do my different seasons and make sure orders come on time. Like, to really break down the facets of this business, it's fascinating. I have an events business, right? Because I think events are really imperative to, harness that culture and that community and like really get people involved and even deeply, more deeply emotionally attached. So you have an events business, you have a clothing business, you have a toy and a collectibles business, you have a technology business, because if you're not innovating on the tech side, then you just are a Web 2 business at that point in the eyes of the Web 3 user. And this web technology business is, built off of blockchain, which is the most foreign and new of the bunch when you're looking at tech stacks. You have a community business, not only for like your Web 2 audiences, which I think is its own community, but this very passionate, Web 3 audience who spend a lot of money on your NFT, right? You have this NFT balance where, you make one wrong move, you do one wrong thing, your NFT drops 20%, people lose trust, they start to criticize you, the mental battle there, you're just like, you're dealing with all of these other different businesses, all of these different facets, and then now you're getting bullied because price is not going up. So then that like takes you down, right? Like, I mean, when you look at all of the moving parts, it's unlike anything I've ever seen. I told the team this once I really, I had no idea what I signed up for, to be honest. Like, I had no idea the complexity. But I told the team, I was like, when we succeed here, we'll be able to succeed anywhere. Like, now when I look back at all the other businesses I've started, it's so beautiful, because if Pudgy Penguins wants to zero tomorrow, how I've evolved as an entrepreneur is tenfold. I mean, I'll be able to go into any business and just completely dominate in a way that I was never able to, maybe do before, even though we crushed it there. Like for Gel Blaster, for example, there were so many things around community that I didn't even think about, nor did I even really care too much about community. It was just like, hey, let's just sell product, move, ads, ROAS, return. Like, now I'm looking at things through a whole different lens. And, what I've actually learned during my tenure here is the best businesses in the world are built off of community. You look at Apple, you look at Chewy, you look at some like the ones who have really transcended into like these massive companies have the best communities. Like, why do people go and camp out and get the new iPhone every time they release? There's not that much of a difference. I only get a new iPhone when it breaks, but those guys get it because it's like they're a part of the community. That's what they do. That's their culture. Yes. That's what they enjoy doing. They work to get the new MacBook, and it's fascinating. So I'm super thankful for this experience, to say the least.
Yeah, you're getting at, in some ways, do you know the book Start With Why, the marketing book? It was like this very buzzy marketing book. I've like always avoided reading it because I don't know why. I just like, I was like, okay, I feel like I understand the premise because I've read the title, but I finally started reading it, and it's what you're describing, right? It's like, it's don't just sell a product, don't just like, drop price, raise price. Like create like a feeling and an identity that people can align with, and it's really just community. It's like, what does it say that I buy an Apple product? What does it say about me that I am a part of Pudgy Penguins or a part of Bored Apes? And this space really targets the heart of that. So it's really interesting to hear you talk about that. I love this line, like, I'm running a publicly traded startup in some ways. It's also even more complicated than that because these people aren't literally legal shareholders. It would almost be easier if everyone were just a shareholder, because you could write your annual report and say, by the way, this is what's long-term good for profitability of the brand. And if you stick with us, in 6 years, you can clearly have this awesome return. I think about some of this stuff and I'm like, okay, if you succeed, Luca, and you make Pudgy Penguins, a household known brand, and you've got your show on Nickelodeon and toys in every store that you want to be in, whatever success looks like. And I do actually want to talk about what does the end state here to you look like, and we can maybe get to that at the end. But how confident are you about what that will end up meaning for the NFTs themselves, right? Like, there's a world where these are decoupled, where you've succeeded in all that way and the NFT doesn't necessarily go up 1,000-fold? Or do you not see that as a possibility?
No, I don't see that as a possibility. And I think there's really two reasons. One, the lens and how we look at it and our whole ethos. Like if you really, when we first took over this business, we did Venn diagrams of every major project. Like why did they all succeed? The top ones that did things better than most. And Bored Ape did this the best because they made their holders rich. And why does that matter? Because there's a base and there's a trust and there's champions that can go and push anything that they push, right? So the Bored Ape community is so strong, they'll buy anything that Yuga Labs does until it just becomes unprofitable and there's historical data to back that up. But they've basically solved for a problem that I think is not to be underestimated in terms of one of the advantages for Web3. And that is the ability to capture the attention of 5, 10, 15,000 people and make them the ultimate champions of your brand. Like having these people champion your brand, 5,000 people is not to be underestimated. That's all you need to build a multi-billion-dollar business. And people will do that if they have the NFT because there's aligned interests. And so for us, it's really important to accrue value back to the NFT because when it's all said and done, like no matter what we do, whether it's, a video game or a TV show or toys, if I keep that nucleus strong, I'll be able to sell as much as I want, wherever I want, as long as that nucleus is strong. Because the chain reaction of 5,000, 10,000 people pushing a product, tweeting it, the impressions, how far that rabbit hole really goes down, I think is really hard to measure, but it's a really impressive measurement. And so keeping the top of the pyramid in terms of the NFT holder strong is super important. So how we look at that is, if we build a business that does, $1 billion a year in toy revenue, which is very possible, to be honest, you'd be surprised how many companies actually do that. There's more than like just 5, there's like 30. And you can translate value to the holder through a licensing arrangement, right? So like our backbone to how we think of value accruals through 2 ways. One, through licensing, which is, hey, we know how to move product, we know how to create content, we know how to get followers, we know how to get views, we know how to make money, right? Like, can we translate that success back to you guys to the form of a meaningful transaction? I.e., if I sell $100 million of this toy here, right, then the holder who gets this toy may make, $500,000 in perpetuity or $1 million in perpetuity, whatever that number may be. But that's a real transaction. That's one that's not dependent on Ethereum price. That's one not dependent on, market conditions or volatility. That's a pure transaction of me saying as a brand owner, you own this asset that's a digital asset in our ecosystem. I give you the right to license that asset. I'm going to license it from you and we will pay you in perpetuity every single year, or we'll pay you an upfront payment, right? Maybe I'll just say, hey, we want to make a toy out of your penguin. Here's 10 ETH. Click a couple buttons, get an arrangement together, and keep it moving. And so I believe you can do that beyond just products. I think content is really how you scale and touch everyone. If you look at our Instagram and our GIPHY and some of our social networks, we're getting tons of views and tons of exposure there. And I'm using other people's penguins. So what happens when I start paying you for the right to use that, your penguin and these assets, you can scale that. And so the more successful the brand becomes, the more successful the holders become. And so that's how I see the relationship intertwining. The other vertical is just pure brand awareness. And I think this is just down to like mathematics on how things work. For us, our origin story, our first editions, our nucleus to our brand is our NFT. That is where we started. That is where we will always stay, no matter how big we become and where we go. That is what made us who we are. And that is really a core value proposition for us and why I think we're different. And so as more people start to consume the brand on the top of the funnel, whether it's 1 million people, 2 million people, 5 million people, 10 million people, eventually as they participate in fandom and really start falling in love with our brand and our message, they will trickle down. And where they'll eventually come to is this origin story, which is this NFT. And remember, I only have 8,888 NFTs. That's not that many when you think about it, when you talk about, 5 million people loving your brand. And so eventually there'll be a supply shock, and then value will accrue through a very mathematical equation, which we're all familiar with, where, people want something, no one wants to sell it, they own it, they believe in it long term, and then they will take a minimum price that is exponentially more than what they bought it for. And so that's how I see value accruing through 2 ways.
Yeah, you touch on a lot in that I think is really interesting, and I'm fairly persuaded on this as well. I feel like when I first started in NFTs, I was much less convinced that whichever brands, if brands succeeded in becoming like mass known, that it would necessarily mean a particular thing for the NFT. But I've come around to that view. And you then also described this very particular relationship around licensing that I want to get into in just a minute here. I just want to say, like, you touch on Yuga as an example, and I agree. Obviously, they have executed incredibly well, and they have a very loyal following for the point that you made, because they've made their holders money. But that does feel like a kind of tenuous, I find that nerve-wracking. Like, if the core to the relationship is a financial one as opposed to a love of the IP, I actually do think that puts you in a tenuous position, because nobody can execute flawlessly all the time, right? Like, things go wrong, bad shit happens, and what we talk about, like, building in public means that all of that is now very publicly visible. So I do think that's a nerve-wracking, like, I don't know how long Yuga can just sustain what they've been doing.
So it's interesting you bring this up, because it's a house of cards, right? And the trick for the house of cards, for it not to fall, is if people are in the money or out of the money. And so if people are in the money, it will continuously work, right? Because you mint it, you can make money, and then you're fine. But eventually, if it screws out of the money, which I believe the more digital assets you create in your ecosystem, the more likely that that's going to happen, then things get really precarious and really scary. And so their model, I think, is one that is really amazing in a bull market. So when I was thinking about accruing value, I was like, okay, I know how Yuga did it, but there's a lot of variables that go into play there. Like, I can't just start airdropping NFTs in my community, like, if I'm out at 20 ETH floor, it's pointless, because that airdrop is going to be worth half an ETH. Like, what is that really? All that's doing is diluting supply. Digital ecosystem becomes layer scarce. So, like, there's a lot of variables in play here, but it's one of those that I think in a bear market doesn't really work. And so when looking at it through that lens, this is kind of how we came to the conclusion. Like, I didn't come into Pudgy Penguins like, light, this is how I'm going to change it. Like, the vision definitely matured a couple months into this, where I was like, okay, I know what they really want. So what I know they want today is transactional utility. They want price go up. They want free money. Again, one of the best days of my life was my 8-coin airdrop. I ran around the block a couple of times, like, with my shirt off. I couldn't believe it. And I want to do that for my community, right? Like, I want to, but that is just like, it's almost like creating things out of thin air and giving it to people.
It's not like, kind of like that. It is literally that.
Exactly. When you look at that in like a very, like, if you look at that through the lens of honesty, and like, that's like Ponzi-nomics. You know what I mean? That's just like, that's what that is. And so how do you create a transactional utility and a value proposition that's not built off of creating things out of thin air? Like, that is really important for me if this is going to win. And so, well, if I'm looking at it, like, I got to build a sustainable, growable, forecastable stream of income. I've got to do toys. I've got to hit these touch points. So when that wins, can I bring value back to people through like a real transaction, a real arrangement, right? Because a licensee and licensor arrangement is a deal that's been done for hundreds of years. We've seen that for a long time. That's not a Ponzi scheme. That doesn't break. If I can actually go and sell hundreds of millions of dollars worth of toys on an annual basis, and I can take 1 to 5% of that and bring that to the holder that the holders that I've done arrangements with, then like, okay, that's sustainable, that's growable. Like, that actually is like a real value proposition. Now, it's complicated and it adds a layer of complexity that is not as easy as just like creating things out of thin air and dropping it to people. There's a lot more moving parts. But to me, if we really want this space to win, I had like an epiphany one night at 3 a.m. and I woke up and I wrote it all down. You have to make this real. It just cannot, you cannot build the whole space off of Ponzi-nomics.
Yes.
It just can't. So I do like the Ponzi-nomics, like in the right scenario, the right variable. And I think the holders love it too. It's a great way to touch every holder. That's the key, because the Ponzi-nomics, you can touch everyone. Yeah.
So this is exactly what my next question was going to be. Do you anticipate having deals with all 8,800 and change of the Pudgies that are out there between products and social media deals, or how do you see that playing out?
Yeah, so social media deals, I think, is how you do it. And so we built a tech stack that will be launching, I keep moving it back, but we keep having things, so I won't say, but we solve for this problem. Because the problem was, I thought to myself, when we did our PMI toy deals, We licensed 16 Pudgy penguins from 16 holders to create 16 toys. And we were the first major project, and I think probably the first project ever, to go directly to their community and say, hey, we're going to license your IP to create our product. In the past, Doodles would make a figure, they made it, no one got paid for it, that's not a holder's NFT. They sell it, they make money, they move on. Super Plastic, Bored Ape, same thing. Bored Ape makes some designs, they move on, same thing. In our situation, we said, hey, we're going to make these products, but we're going to share the value proposition with you guys. But the problem, and when we realized it in real time, we were like, well, the reason why no one's done it is because it's a real pain in the butt.
Well, the legal things, like how does this, if you have a license agreement with one person and then they want to sell that asset, how does that transfer? How does a judge even interpret that? Like it gets thorny. Because I was so excited about this probably 6 or 7 months ago, people were starting to talk about it, and then it sort of went quiet. And I covered it, and we talked to Feature and Remaster and a bunch of companies that are doing this stuff, trying to create the infrastructure for it, but it's very challenging.
Yes. And so we think we solved for it. I mean, I'm like 99.9% sure we solved for it. So there's a way to do this. The perpetuity is hard because you have to lock up NFTs if it's in perpetuity. But how about you just do it in upfront payments, right? Like the non-exclusive right and an upfront payment to use your NFT in an asset. And so how I think we get to the 8,888, to be frank, I won't be able to make 8,888 toys and collectibles, at least not in the next 5 years, right? It's probably a 10, 15-year vision. But at scale, on Instagram, we post almost every day. On GIPHY, we post 100 GIFs a week, right? And so that between, just GIPHY and Instagram, that's 107 penguins that I can license every single week. You do the math, 100, that's 6,000 penguins that I can get to just on social media. Can I give them 0.1 ETH, 0.2 ETH, 0.5 ETH? That's dependent on how much money the brand makes, but that's how I think you can accomplish and do that at scale. And
do you plan to monetize social media, or is social media a marketing tool for selling products and selling a Netflix deal and the rest of it?
Yeah, when I look at monetization through social media, it's us going into a Netflix and saying, hey, we have 6 million followers on Instagram. We have tens of billions of views across all networks. Like, we will bring, many subscribers to your platform. We will retain them. That will increase your lifetime value for this customer base. Give us $50 million and you can do it.
I don't think it's worth going too far down the rabbit hole because there's so much I want to talk with you when it comes to like just so much of what you're doing. But just to stay on 1 minute more, how are you guys handling like a licensing deal? I guess it's a one-time payment. It's easy. If it's like an ongoing licensing deal, how are you handling? You're saying you're locking the asset up for that, or like how are you handling like being able to resell an asset that has an ongoing licensing deal attached?
Yeah, so that's been tough. Up until this point, we were going to lock it up, and that just created too much friction. And so for the deals that we basically already had existing, the deal just follows the penguin.
Yeah.
Right. And so it gets paid annually to the penguin that basically has that deal. There's only like 16 of them, so it's not that big of a deal. And I think only 1 or 2 have sold. Mm-hmm. A majority of them don't want to sell. They like see the value proposition.
And then it's messy because when that buyer buys it from on OpenSea or Blur, like, how do they know? It's such a small size, but I'm always thinking like, I love this model conceptually as like a new model in the world, but the scaling piece of it makes me quite nervous. Once you get, if you were trying to scale this to something that like lots of businesses were doing, we would just need a lot more like on-chain legal infrastructure, which I know there's companies out there, like I mentioned, Remaster, who are working on this.
Yeah, I know Remastered actually. And that's the thing. There's a way to have this on-chain legal infrastructure. Right. And this is, again, it comes into the platform in which I think we solved for it. From our perspective, it's really just, how can you just like reinvent this wheel? It's going to be like it's definitely going to be a grind, yeah. But I think the overarching vision, if you can achieve it, changes IP forever. Mm-hmm. Like, it changes how these things are incubated, and it really changes the relationship between brand and consumer in a way that was never possible before. Imagine like the vision here is imagine, you're owning a character and an NFT and you see it on the big screen at an AMC movie theaters or at Disney Plus, and you own that and you got paid for that. To be frank, the solution for us, I think we're really going to move into upfront payments. It just removes so much of the friction, right? Non-exclusive, right? Yeah. Upfront payment. Like the perpetuity deals, I think the 16 perpetuity deals that we have now, there's probably going to be very few that come past that. Maybe a couple for certain main characters, and but you're right. Like it opens up a can of worms that I just honestly don't want to
go down.
Yeah.
What are they selling for? Like, are they selling at a crazy premium? I mean, I don't know the terms of the deal, but that's fascinating.
Yeah. So our trading behavior actually changed with this narrative. So people went from buying floors and rares to licensable penguins, right? Aesthetically pleasing ones. And it's probably, a licensed penguin today is probably worth 5-6 times more. And so I'll give you a little bit of alpha without giving up too much, but there's something fascinating here because we have some penguins with like 50 million GIF views or 100 million GIF views, or penguins with 20 million views on Instagram. I would argue that that's probably more valuable than the next penguin. A penguin with 20 million views is exponentially more valuable than a penguin with no views. And, how is the penguin licensed and how is that indexed? So we're actually working on, a way that makes it very clear and concise of like what each penguin individually has accomplished, because I think that skews the trading behavior. You should know if your penguin has 10 million views on GIPHY. That's impactful, right? That's people every day using your penguin interact. And so this is where I think things get special.
Y'all know I love Ledger, the world leader in critical digital asset security. When you own crypto, what you actually own is a private key that gives you access to your coins. It is imperative that you keep this key safe, and Ledger wallets are the best way to do that. The Nano S Plus and Nano X Ledger wallets, paired with the Ledger Live app, give you the best way to start your crypto journey while maintaining full control over your digital assets. Send and sign your NFT transactions with full transparency in the Ledger Live app. What you see is what you sign. And y'all have heard me talk about Ledger Stacks before. Well, due to unprecedented demand, Ledger has received all the Ledger Stacks pre-orders that it can fulfill through summer 2023. And so they have decided to pause the pre-orders. Ledger is incredibly grateful for the community's support and is working hard to get current pre-orders out and ready to ship so that they can make even more Ledger Stacks to keep your digital assets secure. Sign up for the Ledger Stacks waitlist and be the first to know when Ledger Stacks are available again for pre-orders. But don't leave your digital assets susceptible to breach or hack in the meantime. Order your Nano S Plus or Nano X today by visiting shop.ledger.com or clicking the link in the show notes. I want to talk about the GIPHY thing because that's the one that's like crazy to me, and I know nothing about GIPHY. My pushback on what you're saying there, not even so much pushback, I guess, but like, the way you're using these penguins in social media, like if your penguin has 10 million views, it's not really because your penguin, like you probably could have put a different penguin there, right? It was probably the other collateral around that penguin, the message on the Instagram, right? Like it's not like, oh, my penguin performed so well in this commercial. like he's going to get the better deal. She's going to get the better deal, right? Like, do you guys think about that, or you're just not going to worry about that?
No, because I would argue it's one of those things, because if I own Penguin 313 and Penguin 313 has, 100 million GIPHY views, well, understand if you own a penguin, you have the ability to license and monetize that penguin yourself, as long as it's like not, R-rated and like something malevolent or demeaning or degrading. And so imagine that I get you, through our platform and our brand, I get you 100 million GIF views on your Penguin 313. Well, you go make a deck.
Yeah.
You go put these numbers in. That's a slide to the deck. And so now you go to a Monopoly and say, look, I got this penguin. This is how well it's doing. It's got 100 million views. Like, let's do a deal. You're probably more likely to get a deal.
Yeah, I'm cracking up because you're bringing back memories of these conversations I was having months ago before people were actually doing this, which is why I'm so excited that you guys are actually executing on this. But when these were all concepts, and just like the idea of the stage moms, like the NFT stage moms, like pushing their NFTs out in the world to get these various deals, and it's really interesting. And you're right. I mean, I just find this whole world so exciting, and so I'm glad to see somebody really pushing it forward. Okay, let me ask you this. So it feels like there's a chicken and an egg thing. Well, I guess it feels like it's easier to sell products once you already have the Netflix deal, obviously. Like when somebody has a story and they're attached to the penguin because there's a whole series around the story and they've got their Nickelodeon show, like now they want to go buy the toy in the stores because they love that. Like, how do you, as you make these merchandising deals first, how do you make sure the toys move on the shelves?
Yeah, so that comes into our core competency. And so I have a playbook. And I followed this playbook for the last 3 businesses I've been a part of. Each one has gone on to do 9 figures a year in revenue. And so I'm confident here, but our top priority is that story right now, because I think I know I can get the first 12 months retention and explosive growth, but how are they going to stick? And how are they going to stick is solely through character development and storytelling. Like that, like I can, one thing, this is some alpha just through the assessment, and I've been to every conference of every major, Warner and Marvel and DC, like where they lack is social media. They have no clue. They think they do, but it's like a very corny, boomer type of approach. And so like, this is kind of our edge. And I think I can make people stick for the first 12 months through my playbook. Our brand message is also one that's really easy to rally behind. Like Pudgy Penguins at its core is all about helping people. Like at a minimum, like if everything fails, if the business goes belly up, the NFT goes to zero, like at a minimum, everyone can say that by owning this NFT, by supporting this brand, we're helping people. And don't take my word for that. Just like go on our Instagram and read through the comments. Like people are impacted positively by Pudgy Penguins every single day. We send you a text every couple days, uplifting you, trying to make you feel better. Like that's easy to rally behind. That's something that people want to support. Now, can they support that for like 10 years? There's not enough stickiness there. But that's where the story comes. And so kind of my objective is like, go to market, follow the playbook for the next 6 to 12 months. And by the time the playbook kind of like starts to fizzle, you come in with that like extra layer of retention. And there's also some other special things like, our toy is more than a toy. It comes with like its own digital experience. Like we're thinking of things in a very deep way, but retention is really the key. I know unequivocally we can make people stick and engage and have that first impression or that second impression. The problem that we're really working hard to solve for now is the stickiness. Like, because not everyone's going to hop in the Discord, not everyone's going to do all of that stuff. And that is probably the hardest problem to solve for. And
so the playbook is a combination of organic and paid social media, essentially, that you have probably a high degree of just instinct in naturally and have always had, and then have also had the reps to know tactically what that looks like from a retargeting and whatever perspective, and how to make the copy and how to run the ads right and all the rest of it. Is that like at a high level, that's the playbook?
Without giving you the sauce, yeah, that's like the very. That's like
I can't decide if you have a sauce or you're just like you're instinctually a very good marketer and like it's sort of like that's the sauce.
No, I promise you, there's like 2 or 3 variables in the formula that are hyper proprietary to like us and our experience and also our connections. Like connection is key. And I will talk, you seem like the right person to have this because this is my first time ever speaking with you, like in depth, right? Like you seem like you'd be the perfect person to talk to a couple of years from now where I really break the playbook apart and I show you and you're like, oh my God.
I'm holding you to that.
Yeah. We'll do it.
When you say connections, like when you say that, like, what do you mean by that? Do you mean like literal, like human being connections?
You're asking too much sauce now.
Oh, damn it, dude. All right, fine. 2 years. I'm calling you and you better come back to me with some good stuff. Okay. I want to do a little competitive landscape stuff with you. We've established you have this secret sauce and I believe you. I'm inclined to believe you because it's like shown. I mean, you've got hundreds of thousands of followers on Instagram. When you first showed me that, I was like, did they buy these? Like that really blew me away. And then obviously you've got the GIPHY thing that I want to talk about. You've spoken in the past about why you were so compelled by the Pudgy Penguins IP. And so I don't want to necessarily go too deep in that. People can find that places. I mean, it's interesting, but we'll get at it in this question, which is, I heard you say you feel like Doodles is really like your main competitors. Like that's your big competition. Why is that?
Because they're the only people, or they're the only group that's considered a blue chip that is like in that top 5, top 10 area, wherever you want to put them, that shares some of the core competencies that the Pudgy Penguins community and art has, which is just like universal, family friendly, relatively PG. They have a team that I think, like a color palette and a brand that I think is elite, that could go in this direction. Now, I've spoken to the Doodles team. I really like them. I think they're amazing. I actually just had dinner. There's an A16Z dinner with, and Julian was there and I got to connect with them. I think they're incredibly bright. You're funny. And I also don't think we're competing with one another right now. Like I told Julian this and I tell everyone this, like we are competing with Disney, with Warner, with all of these guys. But if somebody were to ask me like who in the NFT space, has a similar vision, a similar roadmap that could like, go in the same direction as you guys and succeed, my only answer is Doodles. Like I think Doodles is the only group that could, be in a Walmart and a Target and could do really great collaborations. Though I think their brand is more avant-garde. I think our brand is more like, I think you can go to middle America with our brand and it'll stick. I don't, just my take is I think like Doodles is a very metropolitan city, hip, hipster, like that's like the audience it could tap into. But I think like we have an edge in the sense that like I can go to Tennessee in an elementary school and I can show them a pudgy penguin and they'll go crazy. And I can go to mainland China in an elementary school and they'll go crazy, right? I don't think the average day person could maybe understand the doodle the same way that they could understand a penguin, but I think they have an amazing brand, and I think they're the only group in the space that's going after the same vision that we're going after.
Yeah. Oh, you're right. What went wrong for Cool Cats? Who would be the other project that certainly has the traits and all those prerequisites that would be needed to be in mainland China and be in Tennessee?
Yeah, and Cool Cats would definitely be it. I think the problem with Cool Cats, and I like their team.
Yeah,
there's
I do
people
too.
on their team that I'm really close with. I think the problem was they just got caught in this hype cycle, and Yuga was doing so good, and they were just like trying to meet the mark, and just didn't have that extra layer of like thoughtfulness at the time, and they just made some mistakes that set them back. Now, do I think they can come back from it? Of course, I think anybody can come back from anything. And I think they're starting to. I pay attention to everyone at a very deep level. It's like half of my job. I think they're starting to turn things around. I just think we've created a really, my goal for these next 6 months is just create a really big gap, right? And so like people can try to follow and fill the gap, but I think we are beginning to like break apart and create distance. Like, good luck getting to the numbers that we're getting and hitting the strides that we're getting, because it's really hard.
Yeah.
Like, it's not easy unless you just want to burn money doing it.
What about VeeFriends? We're talking about potential competition, and VeeFriends I feel like flies under the radar, but you've got like somebody who clearly can operate and similarly is going for the family-friendly, wholesome IP vibe.
Yeah, I think Gary's awesome. I think what they've accomplished at VeeFriends is awesome. I think he's going younger than we want to go. I think Gary is, and what they're doing just through their content, I think is like more Coco Melon than it is like Hello Kitty, Or I think just the way his content's positioned, I see Gary aiming for like a PBS TV show. Like, you just look at the content, there's no way he's going for anything else. And if he were to go anything, I would love to talk to him and just tell him, like, dude, if that is not your vision to target like toddlers, then like you're doing it. You guys are doing it wrong. So for me, he just he goes into that age range that I think is just like, in the beginning, I wanted us to be a toddler's brand. I wanted us to be Coco Melon. And then like a month into it, I was like,
well, because Coco Melon's the biggest YouTube channel.
Yeah, and it's
like
a great vision to go after. I just don't want to go after like nursery rhymes and stuff like that. But I think that's kind of what he wants to go after. I don't know. I that's what the impression I get when I look at his brand. So for me, I just don't think you're not going after, like, I'm going after ages like 6 to like 21. As weird as that, it's like a broad scope. But like, you'd be surprised, like there's teenagers now that like are collecting these things more than young kids. But that's kind of like the angle that I'm trying to look at.
Okay, I'm circling back to this, but in a different way. So first of all, can you explain? I'm so embarrassed I have to ask this. Like, I'm now the boomer. Like, I know what GIFs are, but like, what is GIPHY and why do you have so millions of views? And can you explain this to me?
So there was a post that changed everything for me about a month into this. There's this guy on crypto Twitter. His name is GCR. He's somebody like I really respect from a trader perspective. I think he's like really influential. He hits everything right. And he made a tweet and he said, Pengu, I will ape 8 figures into Pengu token because like Pudgy Penguins is the Doge of NFTs. Like, the second they have a token, we're going all in. And I was like, and they started breaking down the similarities between Pudgy Penguins and Doge. And I thought to myself, like, I really digested it because it's somebody who's just like infamously right all the time. And I thought to myself, well, he's right. There's something here about the Pudgy Penguins and the culture that's like very meme oriented. Yeah. And there's no better, everyone's trying to reinvent the meme, and it's like, it's not rocket science. Like, the GIF is the meme. Like, GIF and meme and GIF, they're one and the same. And so I just saw GCR's tweet. We had a little roundabout with the team, and we said, hey, we just need to double down here. And the beauty about GIPHY is just integrated everywhere. So you can text somebody, message somebody on any platform, and that's how you can just permeate the IP in a really fascinating way. And so we doubled down. We have now 3 billion views across both accounts. And it's something that we're really proud about. And we're honestly, this next couple of weeks, we're going to take it to a whole new level. And so I'm really excited to see what that looks like.
Anything you can share about what that'll look like? What is that? What is taking it to the new next
level?
level?
We just built like an internal, so we made like a whole internal like SaaS platform. It's not like we're not going to ship it to anybody, but it just like for a couple clicks of a button, we can just make GIF production exponentially easier. Like this whole interface, we were doing it through like Google Sheets before, very manual, very like almost like ragtag, just like blah, blah, blah. Now we have like zaps and flows. It's like I just punch an idea and it just like ships and then it posts. Like everything is coded, API calls from GIPHY to our platform. And it's just like, I think it's going to be like, I think we're going to just take it to like a level that no one on GIPHY's ever done it.
When you say take it to a level that nobody at GIPHY, in GIPHY or whatever has ever taken it to, like, here's another example where like I use GIFs, but I don't identify with any of the character. Like I don't really know what I'm sending. I'm more sending it based on the emotion and less based on like a character. Like, do you have models or like what are the other GIPHY characters or models that you're looking at, or like what does that tactically mean for you guys?
Yeah, so GIPHY it's one that, you know, to be frank, it's not something that like, hey, I'm going to get 100 billion views on GIPHY. I'm a made brand. It doesn't do that. It's not it's purely a touch point play. Yeah. But you'll see it right now. Like people in the Web3 space, their mom and their girlfriend are sending them Pudgy penguin gifts. And so like they faded the penguins and now they're getting this GIF and they're like, they know what it is. Mm-hmm. It's really important it's really to appease the appetite of the people who know what NFTs and Web3 are and to convert them into holders. You know, it's not something that if I have 100 billion views on GIFs, I'm going to sell $1 billion a year in toys. Like, it's not like that. If I had 100 billion views on YouTube, I'm selling $1 billion a year in toys. That conversion isn't the same. The view isn't as powerful for that reason, but it's a touch point. Yeah. And it's one that like now that you notice in the next 6 months, I promise you somebody you know is going to send you a Pudgy penguin GIF. And you're going to be like, shit. And then when you get that, you're going to be like, I should buy a Pudgy penguin because like they're doing something right? And then that like converts into a holder, which is like a champion, a marketer, a believer, and then the chain reaction.
It's the very, very, very tippiest, toppiest. I don't even want to say top of funnel because it's not really converting, but it's like it becomes a background noise that breeds a familiarity where somebody goes into Target or whatever and sees a Pudgy penguin toy, and maybe they don't even realize that they've seen it as a gift, but there's a familiarity there that breeds a positive sentiment. And then you have the more direct thing with a Web3 holder who actually knows what this GIF is. And now you've created like an inside joke and a sense of, just deepening that sense of community among the folks who are, in the know and the IYK stuff. Okay. Love it.
I love being interviewed by you, dude. You're awesome.
Oh my gosh. Thank you. Awesome. I love it's so funny because I was talking to my producer and we were talking about this interview and I was like, I cannot tell you how not worried about this interview I am, because I had talked to you before and I was like, Luca's so interesting. There's 10 trillion things I'm interested in about what he's doing that like, don't even worry about the prep doc. Like we're just going to start going and I'm going to have endless questions. So I'm glad there's some mutual joy here. Okay. How much are you studying like the big studios? Like, are you, it's so interesting when I hear you talk, I think about like the Disney Disney characters versus what's the characters? Oh my gosh, it's a Universal Pictures thing and they're everywhere and they're on the party stores.
Minions?
Yes, Minions. Because Decentraland's posted about this, but I had actually been talking about it months ago on the podcast because there was an article about it showing how like Universal has not really cracked down on like copyright violations on Minions. Like they've let it proliferate in culture, whereas Disney's obviously very strict about uses for Mickey Mouse, and so you just see it in culture less. Like, are you deeply studying this stuff, or do you feel like you just intuitively get it? You grew up the generation of like organic proliferation, so you're not so worried about like reading the history of Disney book.
Yeah, so part of it is intuitive. Like I think what we're doing, and I have a thesis here, I think for Web3 and NFTs, I think the people who are really going to shape it are the people in their 20s. I think you're seeing right now a lot of older, like the 45, 50-year-old guys like are having a hard time. Because it's like this our edge here is that like we grew up on the iPhone. Like I had single digits in my age when I had my first iPhone and iPod. Like I understand this intuitively in a different sense. But to say that you can't learn a ton of things from these people is to like give totally wrong advice. I think there's like 50% of it that's like really intuitive and we know what's sticking and we're like trying to hit algorithms and that's really like where our thought process lies. The other 50% is like, there's so much traditional like sauce and like edge that you can add to this. And you know, to be honest, like our core competency isn't storytelling. It isn't world building. Like these are what the studios do better than us. But our thought process here is like, what do we do better than them? And let's just like create a huge gap. And then they'll come to us, do what they do best. And then like we can cross pollinate with what we do best with what they do best. And then we can like form a partnership. So my goal right now is just like double down on what we're good at, create leverage. It's like Bored Ape, for example. They don't build games. None of those founders build games. They play games. I play games too, right? But like none of them know how to build games, but they built such a big brand and they created so much leverage that the best game developers in the world came to them and said, hey, we will build your game for whatever deal you want. And Bored Ape was able probably to negotiate the perfect deal for them and their company. And so that's kind of like my same thought process. Like there's certain things that I know that nobody on the team knows how to do. So we're not going to go and try to figure it out. There's like no point, you know, let's just do what we're good at.
Yeah.
Let's create tens of millions of followers across all of our socials, tens of billions of views, and everything we don't know how to do, people will come and migrate to us and do it.
Yeah, stay in your zone of genius. So that's interesting. So when you talk about, okay, you feel you've got this 10, 12-month roadmap where you know you can get people to care on social, in stores, like that's your core competency, but you need to create this longer term stickiness through storytelling. How are you guys, are you talking to these studios now or are you hiring people internally to get that ball rolling for the later partnerships? Like, how do you play that out?
Yeah, so I'm already talking to them now. The problem is just like the deals are super lopsided because like they love the IP, they love the message, they see that it's sticking, but they're still giving me like pennies on the dollar versus if I was like a major global IP. And so one thing I don't want to do too, it goes back to like our first point, our first balance, is like a lot of people like there's deals I could do right now that would stoke our holders. They'd be like, oh my God, like I can't believe he did that and he pulled it off. But it would really hurt me long-term from a business and brand standpoint. Because it's like, I have somebody who's a major film studio who wants to do our show. They're like, oh, we totally see the vision here. But they want to give me a couple points. A couple points? What do you mean a couple points? No upfront payment and a couple points? Our holders would love it. They would be like, oh my God, Luca is the best founder in the world. But I'm not building this to make a couple points on one of our biggest monetization verticals and to like not even get an upfront payment. Screw you, get out of here. Right. And so like, but I'll know now that deals went to another project, their holders are probably gonna be stoked, but it's like, dude, that deal came to me first and I turned it down. Cause like, I'm not gonna sell my movie rights for pennies on the dollar. Like it's just not gonna happen. So like, that is like it's like really complicated right now for that reason.
How much do you publicly say that stuff? Are you saying in the Discord, like, are you telling people like, hey, we're having these conversations, or no, because you don't want to create the false hype and like premature pump off of it?
Yeah, managing expectation is the key. And like the one thing I don't want for people, like when price goes up, it's great for the people who have been in it since the beginning, but you have to understand there's somebody on the other side of that trade that's getting burned. And so like, I don't want to burn people like like to the best of my ability. And this is the hardest part for me. So sometimes I'll do what we call sooning. So like, there's this thing where like you soon people. I kind of like enjoy it a little bit. It's like kind of fun because I just see them, but like it's actually like not good. Okay. So like the sooning, there's no sooning. You just cannot soon. I'll talk about it with you on an interview or on a space. Right. I will make like a Discord announcement like, hey, I just turned down a cool deal. That would have been so good, guys. Yeah. Also, it's just so hard. Exactly. Like anonymously behind a computer screen, people like just, you know, even if everybody would understand it individually one-on-one, if you had a chance to sit down and explain it to them, like you get people in a group, it's a whole different world. Okay. As we close out here, I would love, I guess I have two questions. One that I think I already know the answer to, and I've sort of heard you allude to it, but would be curious to really hear you say it again, which is the next 10 million people, billion people, you know, we love to throw out these numbers of like people who are going to be onboarded to Web3. Where does that come from? They're coming through the love of IP, I believe. And why I believe that is, you know, these are characters. If not, they're just pictures. They're generative pictures on a blockchain. There's only so many of those that can succeed. There's probably only a handful. And so where are they going to come? They're going to come through ownership. They're going to come through wanting to support a brand and have the same aligned incentives as that brand, and they believe in a vision. But they're really going to become because they love a character and they love a message behind that character and that company. And so, I'm a firm believer that what we're going to do is going to open up the floodgates for a Star Wars and a Harry Potter. I don't believe you're going to get mass adoption through sponsoring, basketball arenas and putting logos on jerseys. Like, I think you're going to get mass adoption through the love of IP. And with our ethos is, okay, we're not probably going to be the people that are going to bring in 500 million people. That's like a huge amount of people, right? Like, to really understand at scale, 10 million is already a lot. A million is already enough. 10,000 is already too. You know what I mean? Like, there's levels. But where I want to succeed is I want to show Warner and Disney and all these major studios that we can take market share from them. And if we can take market share from them, they will put their A team on this space, because right now they're putting their rookies. They're just putting their bench players here and saying, hey, go figure it out. Maybe you find something that sticks. Good luck. We wish you the best. But if they bring their A players with their A player IP, you'd be surprised. Harry Potter can go do an Aragog dark forest in Norway, and they'll bring 1 million people out. You know what I mean? Like, you will only get their A players if you can take market share from them. And if a Harry Potter and a Star Wars and all these major IPs with the A players of those companies come into this space, you'll get 10 million people faster than you can say the word 10 million. Like, you will instantly onboard those people, right? And so for me, I think it's just going to come through the love of ownership, through the love of digital identity, which is also a great narrative, but really through the love of character and IP. And we just want to, be the people to trailblaze that.
Last question, and it almost feels silly because this is what we've been getting at throughout this entire conversation, really. But what is the Pudgy's? This is a 2-part question. Pudgy's end game, and then the next 3 months of Pudgy's, like super short term and then super long term.
Yeah, I think for Pudgy's is just, how do you create the world's first great Web3 IP company? Like, how do you create the first NFT IP and first Web3 community that is, one of the globally recognized brands and IPs around the world. And to say that origin story started as an NFT, I think is something that is imperative for NFTs to succeed. If it's not me, it needs to be somebody, but somebody needs to win that battle and conquer that vertical for this space to really be taken seriously, in my perspective. In the next 3 months, come, let's just say June 1st, is probably a little bit more than 3 months, but let's say it's just about 3 months.
I'll allow it.
June 1st. Yeah, the vision should be unequivocally clear. Like, you should see all of the pieces together, and a lot of things will be and then you'll see it and you'll be like, oh shit. Like, I think this actually, the way this all kind of fits together, really would just need fuel in the fire. And then if you can time it well, this year for us, I told the holders this, and I told our community and our team, this is where we put our flag in the ground. And at the end of this year, we are unequivocally a top 3 project. I don't think we can jump right to the top 1. I just don't think that's possible, right? Not yet. But I think we unequivocally become a top 3, and people are just look at us, and it's you just can't argue that's not, there's no 3 better projects in the space than us. And that's my goal.
Luca, this was so fun. I was so excited for this interview, and it was even more fun than I thought it was going to be. And that's really saying something. So thank you for coming on. We'll have you back anytime. And in 2 years, we'll have you back to spill all the secrets about how you've made your many millions on social media.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of Overpriced JPEGs. If you liked this conversation, if you liked this episode, please go ahead and hit subscribe. It helps me out, it helps the show out, and it means you will get alerts and updates when we post new content. Thanks again.